Stopping advanced threats requires knowing exactly what you're up against. ExtraHop Reveal X is the only solution that shows you not just where intruders are going, but where they've been. 90-day look-back and complete network visibility across the data center, cloud, and device edge help security teams respond 84% faster with ExtraHop Reveal X network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/extrahop. Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot support the powerful, real-time automation and oversight that organizations require to take risks that matter to succeed. CyberSync continuous control automation ingests data from the IT GRC stack to update controls against regulatory requirements and risks in real time, delivering insights and visibility. See how members of the Fortune 500 are saving millions annually by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersync.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Adrian Sanabria. Security Weekly we're so excited to announce that Security Weekly Unlocked will be held in person, yes, live, this December 5th through 8th at the Hilton Lake Buena Vista. That's outside of Orlando, Florida, folks. Call for presentations and early registration for Security Weekly listeners is open now. Visit securityweekly.com/unlocked to submit your presentation and register for the early registration price before it expires. Also, join us on June 10th at 11 a.m. Eastern for our technical training on insider risk to learn how to quickly mitigate data exposure risks. Then join us June 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern to learn how web application firewalls can help mitigate exposure in a complex threat landscape. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register now. If you missed any of our previously recorded webcasts or technical trainings, they are available at securityweekly.com/on demand. See, last week was a holiday, and now I'm all tongue-tied. All right, let's get.
You didn't stretch before the podcast.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I guess so. I gotta stretch before a lot of things these days, as old as I'm getting. But I didn't expect the podcast. Woo! All right, articles for the week. I actually have 7 in here. I usually try to stick to roughly 6, but one of them ties to our last segment, so I kind of brought it in here. Yeah. First one up is around. Look, we've seen a ton of ransomware attacks lately, right? I mean, they're in the news every week. There's another one, and I don't see this trend stopping anytime soon. And there's a pretty good article here around 4 immediate measures to execute after a cyber attack. I thought it was a good discussion point for people who need to start thinking about their preparedness when they get attacked.
Yeah, no, it's a good article, and it really helps with that getting your mind into that response mentality, right? What happens when the stuff hits the fan, and how do you react? One thing the article did miss, which I definitely want to make sure we cover here, contact your cyber liability insurance, honestly. It's something you have to do. And we can argue at what point. I would say maybe in tandem as you're containing, because that's going to dictate, number one, what you do, how you do it, right? And determine the leaders that are involved in, and bringing in a fiduciary and an attorney. We have to focus on make sure you call cyber liability insurance and get them involved right away.
Yeah, it really sits in between kind of the contain and report phase.
Exactly.
Right, because we are going to cover some things around cyber insurance towards the end of this segment, because again, these are linked together. We learned that based on your cyber insurance provider, there are certain things you can and can't do as part of a recovery mechanism. So if you're not notifying them early in the process, it could really hamper any of your recovery efforts.
Right, and your ability to get refunded. That's the biggest piece, right? The whole reason why you have insurance is you want to recover some of that expenditure that you're putting out to fight this incident, right? And to really come get your business back up and running. And if you make the wrong step, that could literally put every dollar at risk that you could be getting back from insurance. You don't want to do that. So like you said, Matt, contain and then call cyber liability insurance, because that's going to That's going to help you through that IR process, and make sure you're doing it in the right way to preserve the funds that will be coming back to you.
Yeah, exactly right. Because they're going to recommend potential. They may even mandate who your investigation firm is.
They do.
Yeah.
They're going to,
They've got a list, a pre-approved list. Yeah.
100%. And they assign a fiduciary. One of the first things they do is they assign a fiduciary who literally signs off on every dollar spent, and that fiduciary is typically an attorney.
Yep.
That sounds awful.
It does sound awful, but this is insurance. This is what insurance is, and this is what they do, right? Insurance companies, they deny all claims to start and then figure out whether it's eligible.
Well,
how do you think they make their money?
It's interesting about cyber insurance because I heard in the early days of it, they basically paid out on all the claims because they didn't know enough about it to say no.
And guess what that did? Guess what that did? They all of a sudden said, holy crap, we're paying all this money out. We need to start assigning attorneys and IR companies to this.
Yeah, that lasted like all of 5 years, and they're like, we're going to go about this differently.
We're not losing this money.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. I think one of the bits of this I can't stress enough that this article really gets right is talking about the reporting. And in some of the breaches and incidents I see that are really poorly handled. A lot of it comes down to kind of controlling the conversation and being transparent about what's going on. There's nothing worse than a report coming out from an employee, that a breach has occurred or something like that, and then the company comes back and says, no, it didn't. And you get this whole cat and mouse where the journalists are trying to figure out what's going on, and the company's trying to keep a clamp on information. That's a losing game. That is not the way to play that game.
Right.
Yep, definitely not. The second article ties to our previous segment. That's why I brought this article in, because I thought it was really relevant to the conversation we just had with Travis, which is kind of a CISO's guide to AppSec programs, right?
Yep.
And there's a really good application security program checklist in here that I wanted to highlight, because it talks about some of the things you brought up, Jason, in the last segment around, look, you got to create a relationship on the left, right? And with the business, right? It's kind of in the early steps that kind of goes hand in hand with getting your arms around asset inventory and what you have. But there's relationships that have to be built with other parts of the business, which are highlighted in this checklist.
100%. I mean, it's a very direct statement in the article that says, ultimately, your security leader, to shape your program, you have to focus on areas where you can map to the business, pointed in the direction of business enablement, right? I mean, traditionally, we've been seen as a roadblock. Traditionally, we've been seen as just a technical arm. If we want to be seen as business leaders and we want to be seen as an organization that can enable the business, we have to be doing these things. There is no if and but about it. We have to be having the business conversations.
Yeah, I like number 10. Find opportunities to bring security to the masses for free or at a low cost, but with high impact by preventing vulnerabilities, blah, 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 right? I mean, just the first part of that statement is so powerful because that's not the way most security organizations think.
No, and again, I mean, it's a scenario. I had this conversation this week, and the conversation went around. Well, is it worth organizations doing assessments if they're only doing it once a year or twice a year? And my response was, you want to know what? Out of the gate, doing something is better than doing nothing. Let's get the organizations into good habits and then mature their mindset as we go. It's that same mentality, right? Sometimes we're going to have to do things for free to mature the mindset, to mature the program, to mature the habits, to get people involved and comfortable.
Right. Involved and comfortable, which leads into our next one, the evolution of the CISO from Naysayer to Enabler.
Hey, just rewind the last 3 minutes.
just hit rewind. But some of the things that were in here, I thought were a little odd. I like the title of the article. I like the premise of the article. But then they get into things like, okay, well, this might work actually. Create a secure sandbox for development teams to innovate freely. Okay, I mean that would help enable the application security environment in the discussion we just had around the AppSec program. But then we get into the whole machine learning and some of those. You get into a couple buzz areas that I was like, ooh, I don't know that I want to go there. But
right. I mean, I looked at different pieces of this that I pulled out, and the section that was freeing the value of data was a little fluffy. But then at the end, I looked at it, I said, you want to know what? As a CISO, it's my job to help the organization navigate data privacy regulations, the law. So yeah, okay, I can provide value there, right? Because we can have that strategic conversation around here's what we can be sharing, here's what we can't be sharing, and if we want to share certain types of information, here's how we would go about designing the method of sharing that, right? And so yeah, that's a place you can add value once you get through the fluff. But ultimately, I think at a high level, we need to wrap our heads around the conversation of we're becoming business enablers by doing what we're doing, right? And having those business conversations. So I think title's awesome. Certain key points in the article were great. You got to kind of just weed through some of the fluffy stuff.
Yeah, and I think the question he poses in the freeing of data, right, is when was the last time the CISO helped unlock the potential of a whole new revenue stream for the enterprise? That's a business enabler, right? Right there. Right. That is a business enabler.
Absolutely. 100%. And you want to know what that is? Getting with your BI department or your marketing department or whoever's crunching the data within your organization and build a relationship with that leader. So that way you can start having innovative conversations about the future of that data.
Exactly right. Same conversations we're having internally.
And it's interesting. Like there's a lot of legacy issues, that maybe before you got there, that security is created, and there's value in going and understanding, how those different business units are working and things like that. Sometimes you discover stuff where they're like, this would be a lot smoother if we could just do this or this and that, and. The way they're doing it is based on some old best practice that we've long debunked and gotten rid of. And you can say, actually you can do that now because we have modern browsers and Flash isn't a thing anymore, or whatever the case might be, but it's important to revisit that stuff because a lot of times especially older businesses, they're doing things because that's the way they've always done them. And somebody told them no 20 years ago, and they're still going off that no. They're not sure why, but they still are.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot that we have to do, especially for a new CISO to an organization. There may be some cleanup that you have to do from some legacy relationship problems that may have existed, right? I mean, I've had experience where having conversations.
I love that legacy
leaders,
relationship problems.
Yeah, honestly, right? I mean, it's one of those scenarios where a traditional security team could have been that. Absolutely not. You're not doing it. No, stomp the feet and walk away. Where now, having conversations with some of those business leaders, it's what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? Then we work our way back from there. Maybe we don't take the road that you think we should be taking to get to that outcome. Maybe we have to take a side road and take a highway and then go a little bit different direction. But I'm going to give you the map to get to your outcome in a secure way, right? So it's about talking about the outcomes instead of being that organization of, no, you can't do that.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a good lesson for all leaders, I think, across the organization. Map out your outcomes, figure out how you're going to drive to those outcomes. Because when it comes to legacy, whether it's security or product or content, or I could go on for a long time, folks, because I've been working through this internally for a while. We got to start rethinking, how do we achieve the outcomes? And maybe that means we need to add new things. We need to change things, right? And if we focus on the outcomes, we'll be better off at the end of the day.
That's it. 100%.
Yeah. This next article, I've got a bone to pick on this one. So 5 cybersecurity approaches that businesses should take. They give you 2.5, 3 of them. And then they're like,
and then a paywall. And then it's a paywall. Yeah, so I'm going to put it this way. I didn't. Yeah, I didn't pay, obviously. And I think it was. I don't know. I didn't even bother wasting brain cycles on it.
Yeah, the first one I didn't really, I kind of ignored it. I got down to harden your critical infrastructure, and I started to get interested, and then they throw up the paywall. And here's why I say that. I mean, look at what's happened over the past few weeks, right? With these ransomware attacks, and I am concerned that there are a lot of critical infrastructure areas that are not prepared for what is happening, and I think what is more coming when it comes to ransomware. And so I thought he was on a track here that I was really interested in, and then I hit the paywall and I was done.
Yeah, I mean, the first two were just common sense stuff, right? Talk to people on your unified communications platform like Teams or Slack. Send notifications through there if you have to, right? Okay, got it. Start learning incident response. Yeah, we just talked about that too, right? Harden critical infrastructure. Yeah, believe me, I'm sure the folks at Colonial knew that they had to harden their critical infrastructure, right? But it's how do you get it done?
Right.
Yeah, so often that's it. It's like people are, why didn't they just do the basics? That same refrain that you hear. But it really is. It's not that they don't know how to do it. It's that doing it's hard. And doing it at scale.
And you're absolutely right, Adrian. It's one of those things where it's say easy, do hard. We weren't in their shoes. We don't know what they were dealing with from a bureaucracy perspective, a funding perspective. We don't know the culture and what was going on there.
See, I think that's the biggest challenge with critical infrastructure right now, is they don't have the resources, people or money, or potentially the technology, right? I mean, I think that's the challenge in the critical infrastructure realm right now, is they don't have the resources that other organizations have. It's not their core competency per se. Their jobs are to run aspects of these plants and manufacturing and water facilities. I think it's really challenging in some of these sectors.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's partially that, and partially, the leadership isn't really on board with it. And because I know there is a lot of federal funding available for even the private critical infrastructure out there to use for cybersecurity specifically. But they, some of them aren't even aware of it. And, some of them, if you gave them the money, they wouldn't know what to do with it, because they barely have IT folks, much less, somebody with a security background that can help them make the most of it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Agreed. Yep. That leads into the 17 cyber insurance questions you're going to be asked if you haven't already been asked.
Oh my God, are these interesting?
Yes, some of them are very interesting. Some of them are a little. I'm not quite sure where they came from, but I thought it was a good starting point. These are questions where people, I think CISOs, others that are starting to apply. The cyber insurers are going to get more specific around the controls that are in place. This may not be the complete list, but it is a roadmap of what I think is coming.
Oh, 100%, Matt. And the moral to this story is insurance companies are going to be doing way more diligence than they did in the past. That's the moral of the story. I would take the questions individually with a grain of salt, because every insurance organization is probably going to have their own set, depending on who they partner with, who they use to help them build these questions, if they have a cybersecurity professional on staff. But the moral of the story is insurance organizations are going to be doing way more diligence than they ever have.
Yeah, Jason, are you ready to be asked if you have a zero trust?
Am I ready? Of course.
Are you prepared for that? It's going to happen.
I didn't know zero.
You have a zero trust in place.
I have a zero trust.
Yeah, we got that. It's right over there.
If you ask me that question, I have zero trust in you.
Right. Well, I couldn't understand why only Office 365. Why not G Suite? It's the same, right?
Yeah,
why do you spell out O365?
It's so specific.
Right. It's too specific, right?
And that's what I'm saying. Take the questions with the grain of salt.
Maybe it's a mark against you. I don't know.
I don't know. And then it's funny, you're going through the list, right? So the other hint when you're reading this article, there's 14 questions there's 13 questions, and then it says other questions of note. That's where the other 4 come from.
Right.
They're all embedded
exactly.
as bullets under other questions of note. Just so you don't, because I had to recount it twice to make sure I had them all in the show notes.
Right.
All right, let's move to communication. 3 effective ways to improve your internal communications to improve employee engagement. And I brought this in because I think, look, in this world where we still do a lot of stuff remote, we're not spending much time in person, how do I continue to improve communications? And, I think we've done a pretty good job at Security Weekly. I think organizations are getting better at this, but I thought this was a good way for us to really think about conscious efforts that we can make to continue to improve engagement with our employees when we're not in the office all the time.
Right. And I mean, as things are loosening up, we're seeing more and more organizations go to some level of a hybrid approach, right? I see organizations saying, hey, listen, we're not going to expect you to come back in the office full time. I don't think we're ever going to expect you to come back to the office full time, but there's some value in having, social relationships and that human contact in an office. So, you know what, 25% or 20% or 15% of your work time, come to the office. You pick when. You want to come every Monday, come every Monday. You want to come 3 days a week, once a month, come 3 days a week, once a month, that type of thing. So, I think that helps, knowing that, organizations are supporting that type of hybrid involvement. But the one that stood out for me, which is something I found very important, has been very useful as a leader, dismantle that red tape and have an open door policy. That has been such a lifesaver for me. Just having employees come and just, ask questions about things that could have been just misconceived, right? And being able to level set and have those conversations and have an open door policy. It opens communication, it builds trust, and it really does. It creates bonding relationships up and down your entire business unit and across business units.
Yeah, I think, my open door policy goes beyond just my employees. It goes to anybody.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it.
I will send you my meeting link. You can put a meeting on my calendar anytime, right? That's how open door policy I am. Sponsors, anybody. I mean, if you've got my meeting link, you can put time on my calendar. I live and die by my calendar.
Me too. And for me, it's my employees, other business units, other leaders, partners, and clients. That's one thing I've made sure over the course of at least the last year and a half, if not more, in conversations with customers. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, personally, to me, please. Right. And having that level of open door policy with a client is important as well.
And I think that touches on something that a lot of places get wrong, where there's a lot of talking coming down and not a whole lot of listening going up.
That's right.
You have those situations where somebody's saying something, and the audience is just kind of nodding along with them, because that's what you do in that situation. And they either don't agree with what they're saying, don't understand what they're saying. There's some level of assumption that they're going to understand what you're saying, and it's just not there. And unless you engage on, I guess, like maybe a less formal level, like some of the stuff that you're mentioning, like one-on-ones, maybe lunch stuff, less formal things like maybe stuff that doesn't necessarily have to do with work. You don't reach that point where you start getting that honest feedback that you really need. And a lot of people crave, like tell it to me, like it is.
Exactly.
And people just are not going to do that. You can say that all you want, but if you don't have that comfort level with them, it's not going to happen.
Right. And you have to do it at multiple levels too, Adrian, right? So for example, our entire organization has a company-wide town hall meeting where everybody from the organization gets on, the CEO speaks, the CFO speaks, and whatever other leader they have on the docket speaks, right? And talks about the organization, where we're going. The one thing I make sure I always do is I have a debrief session with my team right after. literally right after, right?
Oh,
because
okay.
they open the floor for questions, and they want people to text or chat, chat in the window questions, and they'll read them off. But 90% of the time, at least my team, they're not going to do that, right? They're not going to pop anything in there. And it's a scenario where having that debrief afterwards, I literally open up. Tell me how you really feel. Let's really talk through this. Is there anything I can help explain that maybe wasn't understood, or what were, how did you understand this particular piece of the presentation?
Yeah. Well, and the other time to do that is when there's major changes that happen in the organization, right? Because nobody's going to, the announcement comes out. They're like, well, what does this mean to me, right? You've got to spend the time with the team and the individuals that are potentially impacted, just to make sure that communication's happening, you understand all the issues. So if anything pops up, you can address it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Extremely important, especially now that we're not together. There are so many of those conversations that could happen walking down a hallway, or what I would call the drive-by. Somebody come knock on the door at my office, right, and pop their head in and do a little drive-by. We're not getting that anymore. So, we have to have the virtual drive-by conversations.
Yeah, exactly right. Last article, 5 myths of flexible work. I love this article because flex work to me just means I work more.
Right.
And so none of these myths are anything I worry about, honestly. Right. I'm like, loss of control, no. Loss of culture, no. Collaboration, no. Contribution. I'm like, no. So I don't have this issue, but I'm sure lots of other organizations do have concerns around these areas. And maybe that's just because the way I've been working since 2009. Sure. I'm used to it.
Right. But I think a lot of organizations, now that they were forced into this scenario, are feeling a little bit better about it, right? There are some that are still holding strong and digging their feet in. And I truly believe that they're going to see the adverse effects of that, because they're going to have folks leaving the organization because of that inability to be flexible and inability to be comfortable with this type of a flexible work type environment that we're in today. They're going to see the adverse effects of that. But for the most part, at least customers that I've talked to of ours, they're feeling a little bit better. And you're talking about some of the more rigid type organizations who would have never let people work remotely before the pandemic are starting to get a lot more comfortable with it, which I think is a great thing.
Yeah, I think we don't have a choice going forward. I think the cat's out of the bag. You're not getting it back in, right? I mean, it's not going to happen. So what you have to really think about is be cognizant about how you're going to address these different areas. How are you going to keep that connection, keep those collaborations, those communications, all that stuff flowing in a positive way where you don't feel a loss of any of those.
Right. 100%. Yeah. And again, and if you're not, and you're digging your heels in, you're going to feel the adverse effects of that.
Yeah, and I think as we, kind of get rid of all these myths about remote work and things like that, it's good to remember that it's not ideal for everybody. Some people, like when I started a company, my co-founder, that was a hard thing for him, working from home. He likes being around people. Yeah. So it's because I could see the swinging exactly in the opposite direction, where companies no longer even ask people if they want the option. They just assume everybody wants to be remote. Sure. And that's not the case either. It's not 100% in either bucket.
That's it. No, that's why it's that hybrid approach, right?
Yeah. It's so true. It's like, look, we have the advantage. We get to do this, right? This is our day job. We get to, talk amongst ourselves and have these great conversations. But you're right. If I'm sitting at home, not able to have these discussions, and I'm a social creature and I want that interaction, I want to get back in the office. I want more structure around that. That can be a challenge for a lot of people. Even for me, I mean, the ability for me to go back into studio and spend time with the team in person, I miss that interaction as well. So I'm used to being remote, but remote also meant I was doing a lot more traveling than I'm doing interacting with other people and seeing, lots of people in different locations. that is tough. So we don't want it to go completely opposite to your point, Adrian.
No, but that's the beauty of having that hybrid approach where you really, really set, and it's part of the article, set the standards and communicate them and make sure everybody knows, right? I love that. Hey, here's the minimum face time we expect you to have in the organization. You figure out when you want to do it. But here's the minimum face time. We want to at least have some face time. And if you want more, sweet, so be it. Come to the office every day, but at least meet these minimum standards and we'll get the face time. And it's that hybrid flexible approach. I love that strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Adrian, thank you for filling in for Paul today. Jason, always a pleasure.
Always.
Thank you everyone for watching and listening. And we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.